Okay, so those are the things that you will need. They're under the under lessons in the Unit 3 folder. And I forgot to put that on there. Hopefully everybody will know where to get these things. Maybe I should put that on there. I think we're going to start a new chapter today. So we're starting chapter 5, and I'm going to pull up the checklist planner. So if you've printed it out or brought yours up, another thing, you can just look at mine if you'd like. So let's look at the checklist planner. So here's the checklist planner for Unit 3. And if you're watching the recording, you can't really enlarge this, but this is under in the Unit 3 folder under Lessons in Blackboard. So be sure and print that off so that you'll have this. And I'm going to enlarge mine a little bit so I can read it. And I just reminded you here at the top, I always try to remind you that when you're working on homework problems to copy the given information and the number, meaning the number of the problem, and show all work. That's so that when you have questions, you can tell me which section and which problem it was. And first, you notice that today we have a skills review quiz that we're going to do in order to prepare for the Chapter 5 homework. This quiz is mostly calculator problems, using your calculator. So it's pretty easy, but it does give you a lot of practice on using your calculator in the way you're going to need to use it in some problems within Chapter 5. And then today, the section from the chapter that we're going to cover is just section 5.1, which is the introduction to the normal distribution. Now, looking ahead, I want you to notice that this is a pretty short unit. It only covers 4 sections from chapter 5, and that's it. If you look through, we have 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, 5.4. There will be one review quiz, a learning catalytics quiz that we will do on Monday. We might do that one together, kind of like we did the last one, if you guys liked doing it that way. And then test 2 is planned for Wednesday, November 4th. And that's not too far away. So we won't have a live class that Wednesday. And I'm going to talk more about that test. I'm going to give you a couple of options for test 3 so that if you're struggling with Proctorio, I'm going to have another option for you. But that option will only be reasonable for you if you're keeping up with your homework and have completed your homework on time. And so that's that checklist planner. No, it's not that much different than the others. There's not very many grades in this particular unit. There's only 4 homework grades. So you only have 4 grades to get up to a 90 in order to earn the extra credit. And let's see, Jamie, I see you on there. Did you have a question? I saw you turn on your mic. Okay. All right, well, we're going to start by going to the We're going to work on the Chapter 5 skills review today. We're going to do that out of my math lab. So if you go ahead, I'm going to give you a minute to pull up my stat lab and pull up the Chapter 5 skills review. And we'll do a few problems together. We'll just kind of jump around and do those together. So I'm going to write that up on the board. And remember, this is going to be, the skills reviews are all for quiz grades. And like I was saying earlier, the skills review for Chapter 5 is mostly, I think it's all, just how to use the calculator for different calculations. So we're going to practice with our calculator. So take a minute, bring the Chapter 5 skills review up in my stat lab. Hopefully you can. And I suppose if you're doing this on your phone, you won't be able to do this. But if you're on a computer or a tablet, something like that, not a tablet, a laptop or a Surface or a Chromebook, then hopefully you can bring up my stat lab during class. We can work on these together. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to pull that up in my stat lab, sign in and pull that up, get some paper and get a calculator. So everybody go do that. I'm going to get my calculator. I've got my paper. And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and check roll. If you have any questions about the test 2 that was due last night, please stay during the break and I will try to answer all those questions. I will not have those graded. I might have them graded by Wednesday, but it may be Monday before I have them all graded because the class is pretty large. Okay, let's see. Get my roll sheet here. I'm giving you guys time to pull up my stat lab. If you want to, go ahead and use these few minutes. If you can hook up to a printer to print off that Z table. If you don't have a printer, then at least pull it up if you can, because you really can't do much of anything. You're just going to have to rely on what I'm doing if you don't pull those up or print them out. Okay, let's see who's here today. Ariana. Today is 10/19. Cecil. Diamond. Kayla. Christina. Stephanie Garza. Stephanie, are you there? And Kayla, I didn't see your hand. Kayla, did you raise your hand? So maybe they're getting stuff. I'll check roll again in a little bit. Okay, the rest of you can put your hands down. You still have a few more minutes because it's going to take me a minute to log in here. To me, guys, this Unit 3 is, I think it's the easiest one, but that's because it covers the least amount of material. So it's a lot of stuff that's all kind of the same, and it's only 4 homework assignments. So getting 4 assignments up to a 90 over the course of 2 weeks should be very doable. So we're going to go down to, it's going to be somewhere near the bottom. Your Chapter 5 skills review is going to be towards the bottom. I'm going to reorder these later, but for right now, it's at the bottom. And we'll just look at the very first question. Cecil, did you have a question or did you not put your hand down after roll? Thank you. Okay, number one. This is number one in the skills review. And like I said, this is all about using your calculator. So number one says the square root of 5 over 11. And it says round to 2 decimal places. Now, when they tell you to round, they mean round your final answer to 2 decimal places. So you may change 5 over 11 to a decimal. But if you do that, don't round that number. Don't round until after you take the square root. But I'm going to show you how to do this in your calculator so that it gives you the final answer. We're going to work on doing calculations like this without doing it in pieces. So to do that, we're first going to do square root. Now, if you have a calculator where you have to put a number in and then hit square root, that's going to work a little differently. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways. So one way, I'm going to start with the way, if you have a calculator like mine or any TI calculator, like if you're using a TI 84, 85 graphing calculator or any TI calculator that, let's just practice and make sure everybody can get the square root of 4 first, okay? Let's just practice getting square root of 4. So in this calculator, and I'm going to show you how I'm doing it, in this calculator, I can do its second, and then I hit the x squared button down here. And that creates a square root in parentheses. And then I would put 4 in, and you can end the parentheses or not. It doesn't care that much, but I think it's best to do that. And then when I hit equals, it should be 2. So when I did this, basically I did second, and then I did the x squared button because square root is the second function for the x squared. And then it opened up it opened the parentheses. I didn't have to put the parentheses in. And then I did 4, and then I could close the parentheses and then do enter. Now, if you don't have a TI calculator, and if you're not able to do square roots like this, some people, and this is the way it used to be in the old calculators, you'd have to put the 4 in first. So an alternate way is, this is in a TI calculator, in the calculators, or I don't really know a way to describe it, but if, or not TI. Some Casios work this way. If you have a 4-function calculator or a basic scientific calculator that's not a TI, then you might have to do it this way. You might have to type. So when I did it this way, I did second, x squared, then the 4, and this, and it actually, the printout looked like this. And you can, if you have an editable calculator like this one, which is what I love, because you see, you can still see what I've entered. And let's say I hit the 4 wrong, I can go up and change the 4. I can arrow up and change that 4 to whatever I want it to be. So this is a fantastic calculator for user friendliness, and it's not very expensive. But if you have an older calculator or a different kind of scientific calculator, you may have to put the 4 in first and then square root, which is probably still the second function on another button. So I'm going to give everybody a chance. Make sure you get 2 for your answer on this before we go on. And if you have any trouble getting the square root of 4 equal to 2, then you need to let me know so I can help you with your calculator. Raise your hand once you get the square root of 4 is 2 on your calculator. And just leave it up so I'll know who all's done it. Okay? Mariana, have you got it? A diamond? Okay, so Stephanie, roll.
Yeah, I have a question. Okay, so you said we're working on the chapter 5 skills review, the homework,
Yeah,
right?
it's a quiz.
Okay, because I was gonna say the first question is different. Hold on, let me ask
Well,
you.
I'm not doing the first question yet. An example. All I want to know is
Oh, okay.
can you get your calculator to say the square root of 4 is 2? That's all we're answering right now.
Okay, yeah,
Okay?
it worked.
Okay, terrific. Okay, then that looks like everybody. Okay, you can put your hands down. I just want to make sure there's no point in doing any of these problems if you can't if you don't know how to do the square root. So now let's go back up to number 1 and how we would do this. So on this one, does anybody have the backwards kind of calculator where you have to put the number in and then hit square root? Everybody put your hands down, or I can put your hands down for you. Weird, huh? It just takes time. Does anybody have to put the number in? Did anybody have to put the 4 in before you hit square root? Does anybody have to do that? Let me know, because that means I have to teach things 2 ways. Okay, great. In that case, on this one, what we're going to do is we're first going to do the square root, and if it doesn't open parentheses for you, you're going to need parentheses. So do your square root, parentheses, it may put it there for you. And then basically we're going to do this. And so to do 5 over 11, we're going to do 5, and then you're going to do divided by 11 and close the parentheses. And the parentheses are going to be really important here. So make sure you use the parentheses. And remember, we're not going to round until the final. This will be the final answer if we do this. But I'm going to write down what I get before I round. So I do 5 divided by 11. And it's a big old long number. Your problem might be slightly different. But it does say to round to 2 places. So it wants us to round here. Since that number is a 4, we're going to write as our final answer 0.67. We're not going to add 1 to the 7 because the next number is only a 4. So get that answer and put your answer in the blank if you've got my stat lab pulled up, and make sure you get it right. And 1 through 4 are all like this. So you can see you could do those very quickly. Everybody should get 100 on this particular quiz. You can do 1 through 4 very quickly. They're all like this. So then we're going to jump to the first one that's different is number 5. And on mine, it looks like this. And it says on this round to 2 places as well. Notice on this one, guys, that we only want to take the square root of 7 and then divide that by 2. So to do the square root of 7, we would do, and I would put this in my calculator. I'm hoping you guys have a good calculator for this. If not, it really is worth, you can get these in different colors too, but it really is worth getting one of these. And at most, it should be $15, and some places have it for less. If you're paying more than about $15 or so for it, then that's more than it should be. And they'll have this on Amazon and Target. Someone told me one time that they sold it at Target or Walmart for like only less than $10, but I don't know that for sure because I never checked that out. Okay, let's do this one. This is number 5. So if you've done one or more like this, jump to number 5 on your skills review quiz. And to do this one, first we need to do the square root of 7. So we're going to do our square root sign, open parentheses unless it opens it for you, 7, and then we're going to close the parentheses because we only want to take the square root of the 7. And then we're going to divide by 2. That's it. So everybody do number 5. And this one said to round, this one says round the final answer to 2 decimal places. It does say round intermediate answers to 5 places if needed. And what they mean by that is if you do the square root of 7, if you have a backwards calculator or a calculator where you have to do 7 square root, and they want you to take that to 5 places, divide by 2, then round your final answer to 2 places. But I think it's safest if you just do the whole thing as 1, and this would be 1.2.
I'm not getting that answer. So am I doing, you're still hitting the second home button, Miss Haley, and putting in the 7 in parentheses?
Yes, but don't hit enter.
Okay.
What kind of calculator do you have, Christina?
I have that TI. I must have hit enter after the second parentheses.
Yeah, no, yeah, don't hit enter. I mean, if you do, it will give you the square root of 7, and then you could do divide by 2, and that would work. That would be another thing. Okay? This is the correct answer. So I'm going to give everybody a minute to make sure you can do that. Christina, let me know if you get that.
I still didn't. I'm getting 1.87082 something. So I don't know what I'm doing wrong.
Can you turn on your camera and hold your calculator up to the camera for me? Is that possible?
Nah, how I'm sitting
No.
on living room, the glare is way too much.
Okay, so let me show you what's on my calculator. Compare your printout to mine. Let me see if I can decrease the glare. Can you see it? Did you end the parentheses after the 7?
Yes.
And then divide by 2. Does your printout look like mine at the top?
I can't see yours anyways.
Let's see. Is there any, let me turn off my light in here. That might help some of the glare.
Yeah, I can't see it, Miss Haley. I don't know what I'm doing wrong here. Oh man.
It should look like, okay, so you should have hit, if your calculator's like mine, clear, okay, Christina, clear it out. And I want you to do second x squared. And it should pop up when you do that. When you hit second x squared, you should see this. You see that?
No, I have an empty blinking blank box, but I can start the parenthesis there.
Okay, then you must not have the exact same calculator that I have. Yeah, put the parenthesis there if it didn't open it for you. And then do the 7 and close the parentheses. It's extremely important that there are parentheses around the thing that's under the radical. That's extremely important. Otherwise, you will not get the right answer.
I don't know what I'm doing wrong. Okay, so I'll have to.
I want you to try something else, Christina. Just do square root of 7. When you just do square root of 7, do you get this? 2.645. Do that.
No, it just repeats the same thing in my answer button. After I press enter, it just still looks like point. I mean, it just looks like the square root of 7 again.
Oh, then you've got it in radical mode. You've got to change it.
How do I change that?
Let me see.
On mine, there's a button that says DRG, and you just hit Control and click that button. I don't know if it's the same for y'all.
DRG. Yeah, degrees, radians, that shouldn't matter. Now yours is just, I think yours is just in the wrong mode. Let me see something.
That may have been why I didn't do good on my test as well.
Oh, yeah, we've got to make sure. Let me see if there's a little thingy. If yours is new, there's a little thingy, a little cheat sheet thing in the calculator. I was looking at that and see if it.
Okay, well, I will try to play with that during our break. I hate to interrupt class on that. I just wasn't getting the same thing.
I do see something here. It says resets unit without displaying a menu. It looks like you can do on and clear, and that will reset if you're having trouble. Because the default mode would be this, but somehow yours is in, it's putting it in radical mode. But still, okay, I still want to try one more thing though, Christina, okay? Do that square root of 7, and I realize that came out just square root of 7, okay? Do you have that in your calculator now?
Yes.
Now leave that where it is and just do divide by 2 and hit enter again.
All right.
What'd you get?
Exactly what your problem looks like, where it did the square root of 7 with the line and then 2.
It looks like this.
Yes, it looks
I'm using it in fraction radical form. Move to decimal form, and I think so. You've got to change it from fraction to decimal form. I noticed on the PRB button, do you see where it says above it F to D? Yours is in the wrong thing. So I think that's the button you need to play with, is that second function on PRB where it says F to D means fraction to decimal.
I'm so sorry. I don't see anything you're talking about. I will try to play with this during break. I feel terrible.
Okay, you might have to Google tell it, but that's what it is your calculator is staying in fraction radical form. It's not converting it to decimals, which a lot of people do because they don't want to work with fractions. And I don't like, that's why I never ever tell students to have the calculator change to fractions for them. You may do that and it may help you in some things, but it doesn't help you learn how to do fractions. I'm not saying you did that. I don't know how yours gotten fraction radical form, but somehow it's been put in. That's not the default. The default is decimal. So we just need to get it back to default form. Okay. I hope the rest of you have been going through and doing some more problems here. And let's see. Really, the time we're going to be using this, these kind of calculations don't come up until the end of the chapter. There's no calculations like this in 5.1. So you can take your time. You don't have to do all of 5.1, all of the Chapter 5 skills review in order to be successful in the 5.1 homework. It's absolutely not necessary. What you want to do is you do want to try to finish it before the due date, which is a week from today. But there's no rush on the skills review. You just need to start it so it will let you go into Chapter 5. If you go to problem number 9, this one's a little bit different. And it says 6 over square root of 10. So when we enter that in the calculator, and you do have to be in decimal mode, then you're going to start at the top, 6, then divided by, and then do the square root 10. And when you do that, you should get 1.89736 and some stuff. We're going to round that to 2 places. So since that's a 7 this time, we're going to round that up to a 10. So everybody do that one. And then there's probably a few more like that. Yeah. Up until number 13. So do a few more of these. And then when you get to number 13, and I think the rest of them are like this one. So I need to do square root 8, and make sure always we put the thing under the radical in parentheses. Then we're going to divide that by square root 5. Making sure that we put parentheses around both of those radicands. That's what the number under the radical is called, is a radicand. And this one says round to 2 places, which is going to be 1.26.
Can you walk through those steps again for number 13, please? I was trying to write as fast as I could.
Okay. Yeah, so the rest of them are like this. So if any of you who've already got this, just work on a bunch of different problems in my stat lab in this chapter 5 skills review. So for number 13, you've got to do the square root of 8, and you've got to close that parentheses. You've actually got to do square root of 8, then divided by square root of 5. Now, if yours is in radical form, it's just going to leave it like this. Or it may change it. It may change it to something over 5. It may change it to that, but it still won't be it. You need it in decimal form. And I've been trying to play with mine since you have the same one. So I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to finish to do a few of these. And then for the last 15 minutes, we're going to actually start section 5.1. So I'm trying to figure out on mine. No. I see a reset on mine, Christina. It says reset above the 0 as a second function. So I wonder if you did second 0, if that would fix it. That's an idea. Okay. Let me try something. I saw the instructions. Okay. Huh.
I think I got it, Miss Haley.
Do you? Okay, good. So I'm going to give you guys a couple of minutes just to practice with this and get good at it. I'm going to leave 9 and 13 up here on the board. You can probably get through quite a few of these in just a few minutes if you're putting them in. But make note, write down what you're doing. If it wasn't intuitive to you, write down what you're doing. So when we come across these kinds of questions, honestly, we're not going to see them until 5.4. So this skills review is really it's really prep for 5.4. In fact, I may change the due date on it till the day before we're going to do 5.4. When would that? Let me see when that would be. We're going to do 5.4 on Wednesday. That still gives you, yeah, that's fine. I'm giving you until a week from today, midnight, so that should be fine. So this chapter 5 skills review is really a prep for 5.4. This should be one of the easiest quiz grades of the whole semester. Okay. I'm going to erase this and I'm going to go on to an introduction to 5.1. And then after the break, we'll be doing a lot of examples from the 5.1 homework. So 5.1 is all about the normal probability distribution. And by the way, on those radical problems in the Chapter 5 skills review, like I said, if you're stuck on that's not going to affect 5.1 at all. All right. So the normal probability distribution is a distribution that applies to many continuous random variables. Remember we talked last time about discrete random variables, and those were things you count. And we had a probability distribution. Remember we had something like x and p of x, and I think a problem where how many shots does someone make? What's the probability of them making 0 to 3 of 3 free throw shots? So we made up probabilities over there. That was a discrete probability distribution. With a continuous probability distribution, you can't list out all the possibilities because it can be numbers and anything in between. You can have halves and quarters and all kinds of things. So one very common probability distribution, and this applies to many, many things in real life, is the normal. And they don't mean normal as regular. It's just what it's called. It's called, think of it, it's not an adjective used in the regular sense of the word normal. It's just the word that they use to name this particular probability distribution. So this normal probability distribution is a continuous, I'm going to write this differently, applies to many continuous random variables. Okay, another thing about it, it is a bell-shaped distribution. That's important. If it's bell-shaped, remember we already know something about bell-shaped distributions. You may recall before we talked about bell-shaped probability distributions. When we talked about the empirical rule. So if we have our data values here, a bell-shaped distribution, remember, looks something like this. You may also recall that the mean was right in the middle. So I'm going to put a mu there for the mean is in the middle. So the normal probability distribution looks like this. Now if it's bell-shaped, that means you can apply the empirical rule. Remember the empirical rule? We had the 68, 95, 99.7 rule. It said 68% of the data values will be within 1 standard deviation, and 95% will be within 2 standard deviations, and 99.7% of the data values would be within 3 standard deviations. Well, that applies here because it's bell-shaped, so we can apply the empirical rule. Now, we're not going to use the empirical rule, though, because now we're going to be doing all kinds of in-between values. You may recall when we were doing empirical rule problems, everything had to land exactly on 1, 2, and 3 standard deviations. Let me put these in the right place. So that's about, oh, that's okay. So this was 1 standard deviation to the right, 2 standard deviations to the right, and 3, and then to the left. So it's bell-shaped. Now with the normal probability distribution, the mean, median, and mode are all the same number right here in the middle. They're all right here in the middle. Another thing that we're going to be talking about with this probability distribution is the area under the curve. Okay. Now, the area, when I talk about area, so like if I shaded this, I'm shading the whole thing under the curve. Now, this actually goes on forever to the right, just gets closer and closer and closer to that axis. Okay. But eventually it gets so close that it really doesn't amount to anything anymore. So we can talk about the total area under the curve is related to, corresponds to, the sum of the probabilities. And of course, we know that the sum of all the probabilities in a probability distribution has to add up to 1. Remember that from the other one? All the probabilities had to add up to 1. Well, they still have to add up to 1. And since the area under the curve corresponds to the probability, that means the total area under the curve must equal 1. So let's write that down. And the reason why the total area equals 1 is because the area under the curve corresponds to the sum of the probabilities. Some other characteristics of the normal distribution: that mean, median, and mode divides it up into 2 equal pieces. So this is symmetric about the mean, median, and mode. That's the word symmetric, meaning that the 2 halves are equal, that if you were to fold it on the mean, those 2 curves would match up exactly. So it is symmetric about the mean, median, and mode. And so these are some of the probability, some of the characteristics of the normal probability distribution. Like I said, this applies to many things in real life. And we're going to be talking a little bit more about that after the break today. So things like height and weight and all kinds of things are normally distributed. Now let's talk a little bit about things being unusual. Okay, so if you remember back when we were we talked about this with the empirical rule before. Remember, this was the mean plus the standard deviation. This is the mean plus 2 standard deviations. This is the mean minus a standard deviation and a mean minus 2 standard deviations. And you may remember that if anything was outside, was more than 2 standard deviations from the mean, that it was considered unusual. So that's going to be an important thing. If anything that's way over here past the mean plus 2 standard deviations or over here to the left of the mean minus 2 standard deviations, any data value in those parts under the curve are considered unusual. And the height of the curve corresponds to the probability. So notice the place where the curve is the highest is at the mean, median, and mode. That means that these three things have the highest probability of occurring. Anything over here more than 2 standard deviations, do you see the height of the curve there? That represents that has to do with how likely it is. Notice it's less likely. We're also going to be looking at all the areas. So that would be the probability of just that one data value. We're not going to look at that as often as we did discrete. With discrete probability distributions, remember we'd say, what's the probability that X was exactly 1 or exactly 2? And if we did less than or greater than, we just added the different probabilities. Well, now we can have in-between values. So there's like an infinite number of probabilities, so we can't just add them separately. So we're going to do something. We're actually going to have a table that's going to give us the probability that a data value is less than a certain number. But that table, they can't have a different table. If they had a different table for every set of numbers, that would be a million tables. So they didn't do that. Instead, what they're going to do is something called standardizing this. And so we're going to have another one, the normal probability distribution, and then we're going to have something called the standard normal probability distribution. And the standard normal probability distribution is based on z-scores instead of data values. So this right here, notice I put an X there. X represents different data values. But when we change to the standard normal probability distribution, that's what we're going to have a table for. So we're going to have a table. It has a table that represents the probabilities to the left of a z-score. I'm going to say the z-scores. So that instead of being based on X, the standard normal probability distribution will be based on Z. And we still have all of these characteristics, including the one I just erased, has the same characteristics, except when we convert to z-scores, so I'm going to put Z here, so that line here, the z-score for the mean will be 0. So the mean will be 0. So we'll have 0 in the middle. And then when you find the standard deviation, the z-score for the data value that's 1 standard deviation to the right, the z-score for that is 1. And so that means the standard deviation for the standard normal distribution is 1. So that this line, and I'm going to show you another example after the break. So the line ends up looking like a number line, 0 in the middle, and that would have a z-score of 1. You go 2 standard deviations to the right, that number would have a z-score of 2. When you go 3 standard deviations to the right, that data value has a z-score of 3. Now, when you go to the left, the z-scores come out negative. And we did z-scores on test 1, so this isn't new. When you go 1 standard deviation to the left, the z-score will be -1. This one, the z-score will be -2. This one, the z-score will be -3. So if you'll notice, the mean is 0. That's the number in the middle when you're talking about z-scores, which is what you're doing when you talk about the standard normal distribution. So 0 will be in the middle. And when you go to the right, 1, 2, 3 standard deviations or more, those are going to be positive. So it ends up looking like a regular number line with 0 in the middle. 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3, -4. And it can go on forever. But we know that most data values are, in fact, 99.7% of the data values will be between z = -3 and the data value that has a z-score of +3. So we're going to go over more of these after the break. I bet during the break today, let me see. Yeah, this is a good time to stop. I bet during the break today that you can finish that Chapter 5 skills review and do the first few problems in 5.1 are just about this stuff, understanding the basics of the normal distribution, probability distribution. I'll get it out in a minute. So try to finish up your Chapter 5 review. Let's work on being proactive and getting these things done early. And then start 5.1. I think you'll be able to do, probably able to do the first 5 or 6 or more questions from this one. Can't remember exactly. But anyway, the first several questions you'll be able to do just on this information. And when we come back at noon, then we'll see if you have any questions on the beginning ones, and then we're going to go more into the examples where we actually find area under the curve and probabilities, and that's what we'll be doing after the break today. So try to get this stuff done as much as you can. I'm going to double check my roll here just to make sure I got everybody that came. And let me see. Kayla, are you there? You weren't there when I called roll. Okay, terrific. I think I got everybody. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 2, 3, 4, 5. No, I'm missing a couple. So Kendra, yeah, Kendra is 1. So I'm just double checking this, guys. I got Ariana, I think. Yes. So I'm going to stop the recording here.